House Democrats will strongly oppose any legislation that does not decisively address the Republican health care crisis. We want to reopen the government. We'll continue to stand by our hard-working federal employees and civil servants, but we have a responsibility to make sure that we extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits.
And that's House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries warning the Democrats will strongly oppose any legislation that does not extend Obamacare subsidies. This ahead of a House vote today on the Clean CR passed by the Senate this week. It did clear a key hurdle earlier this morning after the House Rules Committee voted 8-4 to advance the funding measure. All Republicans in favor, all Democrats opposed. The Supreme Court, meanwhile, extending the temporary pause on $4 billion in November SNAP payments. If passed, the Clean CR would fully fund SNAP through September of next year. Joining me now is Arkansas Congressman Rick Crawford. He is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Mr. Chairman, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. What about this government shutdown? What can you tell us in terms of this upcoming vote in the House?
Well, the good news is Senator George Costanza over there, a.k.a. Chuck Schumer, decided that the shutdown about nothing was a good idea, but 8 of his colleagues disagreed. And so they sent that back over to us. We're going to reopen the government, pass that bill tonight. And, you know, the idea that somehow you can get policy reform on a CR, that's not what a CR does. And they should have known that. They did know it 40 days ago, 42 days, and decided they would do this anyway and cost a whole lot of people a whole lot of time and a whole lot of money. And now we're behind the 8 ball and trying to play catch up, but we'll get there tonight. Well,
people are wondering why Chuck Schumer was so insistent on shutting government down when his entire career he's been against a government shutdown. Here's the senator back from 2013. Watch this.
What if I persuaded my caucus to say I'm going to shut the government down? I'm going to not pay our bills unless I get my way. It's a politics of idiocy, of confrontation, of paralysis. It's sort of like this. Someone goes into your house, takes your wife and children hostage, and then says, let's negotiate over the price of your house. You know, we could do the same thing on immigration. We believe strongly in immigration reform. We could say we're shutting down the government. We're not going to raise the debt ceiling until you pass immigration reform. It would be governmental chaos. Speaker McCarthy needs to stop letting the MAGA radicals drive his decisions and do the obvious and sensible thing. Follow the Senate's lead and pass a bipartisan CR to prevent this reckless shutdown. We do not want to let a Trump temper tantrum govern our policies or cause the shutdown of a government which everyone on both sides of the aisles knows is the wrong idea.
So, Congressman, what happened?
Well, I think the key word there was idiocy, and he described himself very well with that term. And he's been on record for years advocating against shutdowns. And all you have to do is agree to the nonpartisan CR. We'll keep the government open and continue to talk about our differences and try to work toward resolving them. But you don't hold the government hostage in the process. So, I applaud the 8 Democrats who stood up and said, yeah, enough's enough. Let's get back to business.
Well, look, I want to switch gears, ask you about what's going on in Michigan, because the head of the Michigan National Guard is warning state lawmakers that Chinese nationals are engaged in, quote, constant probing of U.S. military bases, including at Camp Grayling, where 5 were caught near classified equipment, on top of the incident last year where 2 Chinese nationals arrived at Selfridge Air National Guard Base asking for a tour of the on-base military air museum. They were denied entry but returned just 3 days later. Mr. Chairman, what is going on with China's efforts to infiltrate our national security measures? What can you tell us about how we're dealing with this and whether or not these incidents are spiking right now?
Well, we continue to hear and see reports just like this around the country in demonstrating a voracious appetite that China has for collection, not just on military targets or sensitive assets, but things like agriculture technology and other things like that. They are all about trying to collect whatever they can collect in an effort to supplant the United States as the preeminent economy, the preeminent military, and the preeminent global leader. And they take advantage of our open society to do this. And our CI efforts have not kept pace over the time, counterintelligence efforts have not kept pace over, well, really since the Cold War. It has been in decline, and we need to really refocus. All these incidents point to the fact that we need to shore up our CI gaps, weaknesses, vulnerabilities, and take a whole of IC approach and leverage every available asset that we have to be able to engage in this counterintelligence fight.
I mean, all the while now, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that China is planning to slow down the flow of rare earths and other restricted materials to the U.S. by designing a system that will actually exclude companies with ties to the U.S. military. So, you know, the president had that meeting with Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the APEC summit 2 weeks ago in South Korea. A deal was done. The president talked about it. The Chinese talked about it. And now we've got this reporting out of the Journal that they are going to fast track export approvals for other firms, according to people familiar with the plan to the Wall Street Journal. But they are going to ensure that these rare earth minerals do not get to defense companies.
Right. I heard you talking about that in the previous segment, and that did get my attention, because what that does is just points to the fact that you can't deal with China like you would any other country. They're not honest brokers. And so I'm sure that he stood there and shook hands with President Trump, knowing all along that President Xi knew all along that he had this in mind, that he was going to make a deal for the cameras, but then work some other angle to the advantage of China. And so, I mean, you know, and look, I'm sure President Trump was aware of that as well. I mean, he's a smart deal maker. So you have contingency plans in place and relationships with other countries that can provide those rare earth materials that we need to do business here in the United States.
Incredible. And the annual National Defense Authorization Act, currently with 3 Senate-passed amendments, involve China. Fight China outbound investment restrictions, gain AI chip export restrictions, and biosecure government spending on China biotech. Is there anything else you think the U.S. needs to be doing to fight back against this aggressiveness from Communist China?
Well, we talked about it earlier, and that is shoring up our counterintelligence effort here at home and making sure that we are keeping pace with that threat that has just really exploited our open society here against military targets and technology and agriculture and others that they continue to engage in.
Congressman, let me get your take on the president still cracking down on the narco-terrorists taking to the seas to drug traffic. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth announced 2 additional airstrikes against suspected drug smuggling vessels yesterday, on Monday rather. It brings the total number of strikes against these narco-terrorist boats to 19. Secretary Hegseth and Secretary Rubio briefed lawmakers about the strikes. What can you tell us? You were in the room.
Yeah, of course, I won't get into the full depth of the conversation that we had, but look, what's going on here as we start to see, the carrier strike group's position in the Caribbean. This is a strong signal not only to the cartels, but to China and Russia and others, Iran, that are playing around in Central and South America. The United States is back. We've taken our eye off the ball over the last 20-odd years as a result of the global war on terror, but we are now focused on our neighborhood, and we are taking a whole-of-hemisphere approach, working with our allies in the region. We're seeing our neighbors in the Western Hemisphere that are also stepping up to join in this fight against the cartels and against intrusion from countries like China and Russia. And this is a strong signal of lethal diplomacy. And there's a new sheriff in town, and that's clear. And I can tell you this, if you're a cartel trying to recruit boat drivers, your job is a heck of a lot harder after 18 and 19 strikes against your $50 million cargoes.
Great point. All right, Congressman, we'll be watching your work. Thanks so much.
You bet. Thank you.
All right, Rick Crawford on Capitol Hill this morning. Stay with us.